Victor, we
I'm
can.
waiting for Victor.
Yeah, I know that, Bashir. Hang on. Victor, we can still see your screen. What that means is that Bashir cannot share his own device, his own screen. So do you know how you can stop sharing? There's a green button underneath the Zoom interface. Can you see it? Or even go up. Either one so you can check. Yes, that's. Thank you. So Bashir, you have.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you have the opportunity to share yours.
Yes, sir. I do have watching. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You can see. Okay. Good morning.
Yeah,
my name is Bashir.
Yeah, wait, Bashir, can you go to presentation mode, please? There's an icon underneath your Microsoft Word document, or is it because it's okay? It is Word, not PowerPoint, is it?
Okay. You say?
Okay. I wanted you to go to presentation mode. That way, it will be easy for everyone to see. But don't worry, continue. Seems your on Word, yeah.
Okay. So I remain Bashir Abdullahi. My paper is Sharing the Root of an Impaired Democratic System. Introduction. You see, as we know, the development of democracy from the Western world, it has been an internal permutation of the existing political institution. Thus, you were having clergy, that was religious leaders, monarchs, and masses at one side. So it was a struggle between these three classes that led to the development of ideal democracies as we are witnessing today in the Western world. Uh, Unlike Nigerian democracy, which have not seen such kind of development. We can see right from the time of democracy in the Greek oligarchy, and even down to democracy, the role played by intelligentsia and literature. You know, literature has always been at the forefront of steering as well as accompanying such kind of political development till when we have ideal democracy in Western world. You can talk of production of Magna Carta, which is a literary work by baronage in British in 1215. It was a work of literature. So also, if you look at the Puritan or rather Martin Luther Revolution, which was started by writing 95 theses, which itself a literature. This was followed by so many revolts against the existing, that were the great Holy Roman Empire. You can talk of Puritan Revolution. We have what we call instrument of government, the first written constitution of the modern time, which is written by a group of Puritan in France. This was followed, this continued up to the time of the actual French Revolution, where pamphlets carrying political tracts all in favor of humanism, ideal democratic system that ravages Europe, have worked for institution of ideal democracy. You see recently in the West Africa, in the right since from the 14th century, when we have this Islamic Learning Center in Timbuktu and Jenny, that's present Mali. You know, there were a lot of intellectuals, intelligence class with their literary works. Most of these literary work were addressed to the ruling elite of that time, particularly criticizing their dispensation of justice, even their philosophy, and with particular emphasis on welfare, security of the citizens, faiths of the rulers to the state, and against confiscation of individuals or wealth from the public treasury. That's dinar. Dinar here stand for gold. So all this development, right from the Western one in the Western world down to this one in the 15th century, West Africa, it was actually the work of literary criticisms, criticizing the government, the status quo, as we have seen. Then if we come right down to the time of Nigerian independence, or rather before the independence, during colonial era, we can see that there was departure from the production of, let's say, Arabic literature to the new type of literature in favor of Western type of education. Because at the beginning, the Western education does not go beyond this literacy and numeracy. So the knowledge is not that deep enough to give the new emerging educated Africans type of knowledge that will allow them for deep thinking on their conditions. They were always being waited for inclusion into the superstructure of the colonial economy. That why it was not possible for them to mobilize the whole citizenry for literal production of a rational equilibrium covenant constitutional life that will accommodate traditional social political ideals and values and popular ideals as we have from the Western world. That was not possible. All we were having was they always succeeded in agitation for inclusion into the political structure of the time. As we have seen toward independence, most of this elite, none of them maybe in form of literary work, they are able to produce a kind of covenant that is from the grassroots. It wasn't possible. They are always been successful in turning the whole political atmosphere into a murky one with a lot of norms of political dominations or fear of that domination against one or the other region or tribes. And at the end, like what we have, northern Nigeria, political leaders from that region, they were calling for secession, leaving the whole project called Nigeria. Even after the independence, the same things happened. There was not any input from rational intellectuals. Rather, everything was left to the political class. And all they were being able to then was to detach the traditional institution from the mainstream political landscape, as we can see today. Therefore, this kind of track record of development in the Nigerian democracy, as against what happened in the Western world, led to the kind of an impaired political framework that does not really start from the grassroots.
But Jack, but you have just 5 minutes more. Can you hear me? You have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Okay. What I'm saying, okay, for Nigeria to have a really ideal democratic system, there is a need for the intervention of intellectuals, neutral intellectuals who, as we have seen in the Western world, who can mobilize the whole citizenry using every literature, every text to take their campaign to every grassroots, irrespective of religion, irrespective of creeds or tribal or region. A literature that will touch issues like virtue and ethics, real ethics of the ruling class, a kind of credentials that every intending politician who intend to contest for any election is supposed to possess before he is allowed for any context. Secondly, the need for inclusion call for like economic abstinence from among our elite, that every political or public office holder should not add or possess additional wealth while he's in office. This will go a long way in at least reducing corruption and other profligacy among our political class. And this kind of topic issues that will be carried to the masses by our neutral intellectuals, I think are issues that common man will always be ready to hear from. Therefore, if we can agree from our intellectuals class irrespective of whatsoever ideology you are belong to, because this kind of knowledge, this epistemology we are having, this Western education, it is majorly clouded with a lot of theories. For instance, in the case of Nigeria, this racist theory, where you are trying to say one tribe is better than the other, or something from the West is better to that, something that is local. Therefore, if the intellectual class can be able to have this kind of intellectual discourse and do away with all these kind of theories that propagate and promote this division among citizenry, I think it will be well good for them, and always for them to carry along everybody from the grassroots, irrespective of their religious, tribal, or regional affiliation. Because we see Nigerian common man is a kind of person that is very easy for him to be carried on. We have seen during, I'm not calling for that kind of protest, but it's a just instead of example during this NSAS protest. You see within a short time how common man was carried. So also even in the recent election, you see how the role of Labour Party was able to carry, even though there are a lot of maybe misgiving, was able to carry a lot of masses toward changing our election process. So if really intellectuals, neutral intellectuals who can raise above their own time, above their own conditions, above these subject yearnings of their ethnic groups, of their region, of their regions, and even politicians, I think they can come with a rational literature that can be easily distributed. We have social media, we have this conventional media. They can even carry their campaign down to the grassroots, like maybe in the case of, let's say, how some religious groups do, they go to the actual grassroots areas, mobilizing people, telling them, because we are in democratic era where you have freedom of speech, so nobody can stop you there. Therefore, if our intellectuals can really do that, they carry everybody along. They put aside religion, ethnicity, regionalism. They can be able to mobilize our people so that we can change from the grassroots. Unless people that have proven integrity, proven heartfelt ethics, who have been tested, who can be known by everybody within their own community, I think if this kind of people can be allowed to contest elections, I think they can be able to change our narratives. But unless, because we cannot leave this thing entirely at the hands of, let's say, our politician representative, National Assembly, because they cannot go by this gradual change as this liberal type of change. They cannot do that.
Hello, Bashir, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you have to round up now, please.
Okay. What I'm trying to say, Nigeria has seen, Nigeria is tagged as a crippled giant. And this narration, because our democratic system itself is an impaired one. And we are always having impaired democratic system because the people, our political class, are not actually sincere, and they are not that kind of people with every integrity that a typical good leader is supposed to possess. So if our intellectuals can be at the forefront of changes by mobilizing the whole citizenry through literature that can be easily distributed, a literature that can be free of bias, religious or ethnic sentiment, a literature that can easily attract common citizenry, we can at the grassroots be able to change our political narratives. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bashir. Please let's put that together for Bashir. That was quite an elaborated presentation. We will take comments on your paper shortly, but I would like you to pay attention to one of the discourses we had yesterday about the role of the intelligentsia of academics in stimulating or conscientizing the public. And that's a debate we can have going forward. Are you ready
Okay,
for us?
sir, but I don't have access to that
Oh,
paper.
no problem, no problem. We'll raise it
I tried
during.
to access you. Okay.
I was just saying that because
Okay,
it
sir. Okay,
tallies with what we discussed yesterday, but just hang on.
okay, sir.
So right
Okay,
about
sir.
now, we'll be having the third presenter speak to us on the topic Africa and the Travails of Democracy and Federalism, Reawakening Plato's Epistemology for Nation Building and Development. Ibrahim Adishala Salah will be speaking to us. Thank you. You have also 12 minutes. Good morning.
Sir, can we have his paper shared?
Yes, they are doing that at the moment. I want to move this the dongle closer to him.
Okay.
Just be careful.
Let me start. Have you seen the slide? Salam.
Just a moment now to put up slides. For you,
I sent it directly to him. I never knew. I didn't. Let me.
Okay.
Have you seen it? Okay. You know. Let me see it now.
What was the email? Are you still, I guess it's session 2 or 3? Fine, sorry. But I sent it to the Yes, we haven't started yet. That's please, Salah, just put on first, yeah. So yeah, so please.
So I will start by giving an outlook of what paper is all about in my abstract. It is no doubt that the practice of African federal democracy has happened the development and nation building as far as Africa is concerned, Nigeria in particular. And we can see that the practice of this African federal democracy in terms of yielding development and nation building that we expected is far away from us. And that is why the philosopher think of Osaghae come to play here. Why he described Nigeria as a people giant 25 years ago. And we can still see that the superstition still unable to prove itself as a thesis. However, the paper pay critical attention to the recurring developmental collusion and rethink the foundation knowledge of democracy and federalism in order to change the flow and creating balances where there are imbalances. By adopting the qualitative research design, I use a descriptive analysis to unveil the theory of democracy and federalism with the African within the Africa, particularly in Nigeria. So we have 3 sections of the paper aside from the abstract. The first one has to do with contain introduction, conceptual discourse, and theoretical framework. While the second one addresses the theory of democracy and federalism by exploring the Nigerian experience and dig deep into Nigerian leadership consequential as a corollary of this democratic and federalism deficit. While the final segment examines the Platonic epistemology lesson as a corrective approach for us to move ourselves from where we have, which Osaghae described as a people giant. Next slide. So in the introduction, we try to take back the existence of the federalism and democracy being in existence before the existence of Nigeria itself. And we can see that there is linkage between democracy and federalism, in the sense that federalism is all about division of power by incorporating all diverse groups to make sure that there is no fear of discrimination and a fear of domination rather. And likewise, democracy involves people's participation. We can see that both of them is trying to bring in people into consideration by having people's government. However, we can see that here in Nigeria, we have we combine the practice of democracy and federalism together, where people, researchers, they have seen it being the reason why we are having imbalances in our practice. However, studies have shown that it is not the practice of the concomitant practice of democracy and the federalism that is giving Nigeria or Africa at large progress. Rather, the way and manner we practice it, thereby giving us counterproductive in our political system. So this paper is now trying to take advice from the word of Plato by looking into ideal state as projected by Plato, where we are going to have leaders who are free of material, who are not greedy to pass the affairs of the state to the promised land, just like this. So, in our contextual research, we try to dig deep on 3 concepts: the African public state, the democracy, as well as federalism. What do you mean by African public state? This is the space that is responsible for the practice of our democracy, which is now quite different from what is obtainable at the international state. By that, I try to interrogate the work of Habermas, who happened to be the person that conceived and pluralized what we call public sphere. But the public sphere of Habermas is quite different from our own African public sphere here. Habermas identified major factors or institutional criteria underlying the emergence of public sphere, which involve disregard for status, domain of common concern, and sense of inclusivity. And we can see here in Africa All these three criteria underlying the concept of public sphere, as far as Adama concept is concerned, are absent totally here in our African space. African space has no regard for what? For status. Has regard for what? For status. Unlike that of the Abamas that are two people have no regard to what? To status. We believe in status. And likewise, the domain of the common concern. African space is not meant for what? For common concern. Rather, for those few people that dictate who gets what, when, and how. And the life of simplicity. African space is not meant to include everybody into the system. Rather, the recruiting of the elite by the so-called elite, by the elite themselves. Next slide. So in essence, we try to take the description of African sphere using that of the AK. In the field of AK, African Nigerian political space consists of two words, consists of two elements instead of one: the civil populace and the primordial world and primordial populace. So, in essence, what's obtainable in the domain beyond Africa is not the same thing that is obtainable within the Africa. So that is why we cannot use Abama's conceptual of a public sphere to be seen as a framework for analysis of this. Rather, we conceptualize on that of the AK. And on this premise, AK sees the African world political sphere, which Nigeria epitomize as struggle and contest for power, status, and what and authority. Now we come to the concept of democracy. Having known democracy has been a loose concept because of the way it is practiced, but I will take that of a definition of Abraham Lincoln submission, which pretend democracy as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But in the practice of democracy in Africa, there are concerned arguments raised against that particular definition. That African democracy is totally not in line with what Abraham Lincoln portrayed, in the sense that it is not what it is not
Inshallah.
Hello, Bashir. Can you mute
Yes,
yourself,
sir.
please?
You said? Hello, sir.
in the sense that both of them, the concomitant parties of both of them, will give us, it is pointing toward the direction. And what direction is that? By bringing people into participation. So having read meaning of the meaning of Jega and that of Africa, we come to define our own federalism as a technique of governance used to neutralize the empire to guarantee a certain level of autonomy for each of government, both for each level of government, but with competitive and struggle tendency among the class configuration within the federation. So what federalism is all about is to make sure that different groups that constitute a state have their recognition. So let's move to the next one, which is the theoretical framework. Though there are many theories that we use in social science to justify our position and our framework. Here, two theories are used to justify our position, and that is the two public and the neo-patrimonial public. And I've said earlier, AK was the one that postulated that particular theory and it developed, and it is all about having two rent instead of a rent as it is obtainable in other words, in other parts of the world. So here, AK insists that we are having two rent, the civic rent and the what and the primordial rent, and the picture of the unique modern African society. So AK argues that AK arguments is on the fact that the civil public is amoral, while that of Primordial Populi is moral. However, what is playing out in our own domain is to use resources of the civil to come and work, which is amoral, to come and develop the environment that is primordial. So what is seen as amoral in the civil populi is seen as moral in the what? In the primordial what? Primordial populi. On the other hand, and that's the constitutional problem of our democracy and federalism. On the other hand, the issue of the theory of patrimonialism postulate a special officialdom. It's a mixed form of domination that brings together modern and traditional practice. In this area, we are having patron and claim. In essence, that the patron uses resources to promote what? The claim for the purpose of getting reward. Next slide. Let's move to talking about the people think that democracy and federalism has brought to us using Nigerian experience. There are many factors that condition the inability of democracy and federalism to give us what we expect, despite the beauty of that democracy and federalism. And I itemize some of the points. Next slide. Some of the points that allow that condition. One of it is the issue of the degree of loyalty to constitution. Here in Nigeria, which here in Africa, which Nigeria exemplified, there is high degree of loyalty to the constitution. The people at the corridor of power, they normally take anything from the constitution that suit their purpose, while others will be jettisoned at the expense of what? At the expense of nation building and development. And also, we talk of issue of citizenry. So in this case, what we are trying to establish is that the issue of citizenry, where you come from, must I first see myself as a Yoruba before I see myself as a Nigerian? In other words, so where you come from determines the kind of what benefit that you must derive within the society. And likewise, we talk about the arguments on the foundation of our federalism, whereby they call it marriage of the inconvenient, that we are not at a time come to round table to signify that this is the way and manner our federalism was, our federalism. And that's why most of our foundational leaders, like Awolowo, like Bello, they have said that Nigeria is near what? Near expression. But whether it is near expression or not, we should now move away from the conclusion of those leaders and come to a round table to look into what we can use to turn this expression that has been articulated by our leader and draw a midway approach through which develop our democracy and federalism can work. In conclusion, the paper agreed that truly the concomitant practice of federalism and democracy within our own content has indeed affected nation building and development. However, the paper now tries to draw from the lesson of the Plato etymological lesson for us to guide ourselves. In Plato ideal society. Ideal society is a society whereby it is governed by people who have passion for knowledge, and they have wisdom, who know best way to pardon the leadership affair of the country. And that is why we try to link this to the leadership inconsequential that we are experiencing in Nigeria. That is what is responsible for our weak democratic parties and that of federalism. So in essence, the paper try to recommend that to receive and to get the beauty, the deserved beauty and the beauty of democracy and federalism, we have to choose leader based on what Plato recommended in his book, The Republic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now we put them together for this. That was allowed for now we're taking some questions and making inputs to the paper. Okay, thank you. The essence of this panel, like I mentioned yesterday, so that we can engage the scholarship of Professor Osaghae who coincidentally is currently attending a UN summit in New York and has shown that he is very much interested in this output that we are having here today. The presentations for today of this particular panel are focused on the theoretical ideas in its scholarship. And one central thread that runs through all three presentations so far is the whole idea of epistemology. What epistemologies have we accepted as canons, and how can we begin to rethink those epistemologies in fractioning or figuring out alternatives to federalism in Nigeria? I'll make some brief comments, then I'll take questions if there are any. I don't know if those of us online have questions, but let me quickly make comments on all three of the papers that were presented. I listened in on Victor's presentation. Victor took us on eclecticism as alternative reading and balance in fragile African democratic spaces. And the thesis of that paper seems to be that, or it seems to suggest that there ought to be an organic way of governing people from the grassroots to the top. You don't just impose decisions on people without necessarily considering their informal, or should we call it their traditional mode of governance. And so there ought to be an eclectic approach that moves from ground up. And that seems plausible because we know it is the case in Nigeria that most policies have failed because they were imposed on people. And that is why a lot of people have challenged the idea of federalism as being unproductive to percolate the dividends of governance to those at the grassroots. You can't take decisions on behalf of people without knowing really what their needs are, their germane needs are. And unfortunately, that is supposed to be the function, the duty of the local governments. But again, it is problematic that the local government in Nigeria has not been able to engage the people at the grassroots to contribute to decision making and to governance generally. But one thing that Victor's paper seems to throw up, and I would like you to also speak a bit to this when you're making comments, is this village to government constitutional democracy type. You mentioned it while you were making your rounding up remarks that there ought to be a village to government. I don't know what you mean by that, but it seems to relate to the whole idea of the Greek democratic system where people gather together in a village square to take joint decisions on matters. But we know that the feasibility of that happening is very, very slim, because we moved from that model of democracy to the representative democratic system, where you then appoint people to take decisions on your behalf. Now, while that might be feasible within smaller populations, Nigeria currently has about 220 million people. How often do you want 220 million people to gather to take decisions on every matter? This is a problem that I feel you need to expand on. For Bashir's paper, I like the historical approach you took to give us how texts have been able to show the origin of the democratic practice we now have today. And that is to show you the facultative power of the text. Many people don't see the essence of text in defining what federalism is, but in essence, it is because of the readings, or should I say the education that our founding fathers had. That was why they adopted the federalist system, because really there has been an indigenous system of governance. And that system seemed to have worked in the pre-colonial and early colonial era. But unfortunately, as we moved on into colonial rule proper, because of the education of our leaders, or because of the imposed culture, the imperialist culture that was imposed on many of them, they adopted the federal system without critically engaging how those ideologies would fit into a context like Africa. And that's partly what Adishola made in his presentation. Now, while texts are important, and the role of intellectuals in generating ideas that then informs mass mobilization towards federalism are important. The question is, to what extent can this text sufficiently and independently address some of the problems we have with federal system? Now, I give you a very good example. You talked about the NSAS movement. You'll be surprised to know that the NSAS movement did not start because somebody read the text somewhere. It started because people had joint experiences of how the state treated them. Now, maybe somebody triggered a move or initiated the move on social media, and that is again to tell you that text has gone beyond what you just read. They are also digital text, they are sensory text. Texts are not necessarily in written forms. And that's one of the things I think you should begin to look at when you're looking at how ideologies develop. Many people who don't call themselves scholars generate a large volume of text on a daily basis. I mean, if you go online, if you go on Twitter, if you go on social media, you see a lot of youths, a lot of Nigerians engaging the national question on a daily basis. And these things are being read by a million other people, and it is informing their social, their social ideas about governance. So the text has gone beyond print. It is now digital, it is now diffused. But the question I would like you to address is, to what extent can text alone, and when I mean alone, without other catalytic action, be able to generate the kind of social change we need to, devolve power, if that is the option we are looking at, or actually to make federalism more effective? That's for you. Then lastly, we had Salah take us through how Plato's epistemology for nation building and development could help us first, on the one hand, understand the travails of democracy, and actually to develop our own autochthonous model for democracy. And he did well by introducing us to Habermas's notion of the public sphere. And he pointed out how that conception of the public sphere by Habermas is different from the one we are familiar with here in Africa. And that's where the problem is. A lot of literature now seems to provincialize Africa. You see, it seems to essentialize Africa as though Africa is different from everywhere else. While we can hold that correct, because, well, like Chris Allen said, how many Africas do we have? One, few, or many? So there are many, many notions of Africa. But the problem with that is that it then means that if we go out there, and I mean outside the continent, you then do not apply the same concepts. You cannot apply the same ideas. You cannot apply the same theories because we developed it essentially for Africa. So how does it, or how is it expected to hold universal relevance? Now, what I'm saying in essence is that we need to begin to, as part of the central theme of this conference, decolonize questions or issues that tend to essentialize Africa as different from the world. Africa is a core and integral part of the world. If there are ideas that are developed in Africa, they ought to be applicable in other parts of the world. Now, Eke's two public theory is a very good example of that. Eke's theory has been applied in almost every major text on social or state-society relations. In fact, up to the time Professor Eke died last year or thereabout, his work was still a fundamental or a foundational reading in many departments of sociology in the US. That is to tell you that an idea that was developed here and seemingly is applicable here can find universal relevance. So that's where I would like you to, touch on, because we can't simply be developing theories just for ourselves. We don't produce knowledge just for Africans. We are supposed to be knowledge producers for the world or for the rest of humanity. So if we are talking about a unique theory of, say, federalism in Africa, how then does that extend to other climes that might experience similar challenges that we face? Because I'm sure you're aware that Nigeria is not the only country suffering from federalism. In fact, currently there are talks in what's it called, in some parts of Southern Asia, There are talks even in the Northern Europe about splintering the kinds of, federalist practices that they hold there. So the whole idea of federalism is universal. Even the US currently is grappling with the problem of federalism. That's why you see that, for instance, in the Roe versus Wade decision that was taken by the Supreme Court last year about abortion, some states decided to object and develop their own laws counter to what the federal Supreme Court decided. And that is to show you the kinds of contestations that are present even in so-called development parts of the world. So if we develop a theory or we develop a conception of the public sphere, why shouldn't we extend it to other spaces? So these are some of my own personal thoughts on this presentation. So I would like to have your comments and questions, if there are any. Does anyone on the floor have questions for any of the presenters? Anyone? Even for the presenters themselves, do you have questions for other people? Okay, so let me take brief. Okay, Bashir, you're raising up your hand. Go on, please. We can hear you. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're clear now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very clear.
Okay, my own is as this I am particularly disagree with this notion that federalism and democracy are imposed on Africa or rather Nigeria in particular. Yes, it is really the two are really imposed, but if they are really imposed, but how long is Nigeria an independent state? If the imposition is to our detriment, can't we change it to the better one? Or having some input, maybe let's say traditional values that are consummate to our own system, we impute into the system, but our political class cannot do that. So if we still take it that democracy and federalism are an imposition of Africa, I think we should stop having this notion. We are matured enough if our political class are really sincere to themselves and to the state to have to change this narration. But they cannot do that because that's why in my presentation I say our problem does not necessarily lies with the federalism or the democracy per se, but our problem mainly lies with the epistemology, that's the type of knowledge, the knowledge we are having as collective Nigerians, the knowledge given in our institution of higher learning, and the elite themselves. Because this knowledge, the ethics engraved in this Western type of knowledge, I think the ethics in itself is not kind of ethics that have really gone down beyond our feet and throats. It's just an ethic that can only be said just from our mouth. It doesn't go beyond that. Like maybe ethics that is traditionally or theologically generated, which gone deep down into our minds. Yes, because our political class, all they are having on this democracy or federalism is just for them how to manipulate and transfer wealth, or let's say capital, from public treasury to their own private treasury. Nothing more than that. Because if they really agree this democracy, this federalism does not work in our own favor, so why can't they change it? Because we are a liberal type of democracy, a democracy that believes in a kind of gradual change to the status quo by means of legislation. And who stopped them from coming with some good legislation that can change our narration? I think nobody changed them. All of the constitutional conference we have ever witnessed in Nigeria, is it a white man from England or Germany come and do it for us? No, it is from ourselves. So it means it's no longer we stop blaming Western world, but the problems now lies with us. Maybe we have to change the narration of our, maybe these corrosive theories that are embedded deep into our system of education. The way knowledge is being generated and disseminated in our institution largely teaches this division. Is racist historicism. You can call it tribal historicism, superiority of one tribe over another. So with that kind of notion, this kind of belief among individual tribal groups in Nigeria, so how can we go ahead with having kind of faith to our federalism and even to our state? So it's an issue that why I call for intellectual discourse first. Our intellectuals need to understand this and or rather expose the corrosive tendencies of our educational system and come with a kind of educational system and stuff that will really do away with this kind of divisive tendencies in our education system and inculcate real ethics that do not only change how to improve your material appearance to the detriment of your neighbor, but ethic that really teaches actual humanism to everybody, not only myself, because this is what I can see this Western education is like teaching. You can talk of maybe it doesn't work in the Western world. Yes, Western worlds have already passed that stage. They have already passed us in the last 100 years before they were having this institutionalized democracy. But we are here.
Yeah, Bashir, thank you for those fantastic thoughts. And it just acts back to what we had yesterday. The discussion yesterday centered largely around the agency of intellectuals, how intellectuals are supposed to be the social agents that push the narratives around how to rethink our federalism. And in fact, the co-organizer of this panel, Professor Remi Ayede, presented an inaugural paper last year, thereabout, titled, "If Gold Rusts, What Would Iron Do?" Academics, institutions, and I think governance in Nigeria. So the thesis is that intellectuals are the center of catalyzing the change that we are talking about in the way we think, because not just because they are knowledge producing agents, being that they are the ones who set the agenda for what we ought to do, they are now becoming implementators, or should I call them field agents in a way, because take any sensitive public office in Nigeria, for instance, you find an academic that is heading it. Is it at INEC? Is it at what's it called, NEMA? Is it at NAFDAC? Any of the top national institutions we have intellectuals. So they are not just producing knowledge, they are now at the center of driving that change. But unfortunately, like we also realized yesterday, they are also the bane of our problems, because some intellectuals, perhaps due to the rational human agency, would prefer to satisfy their own interests or the interests of their constituencies over those of the rest of society. So this is a debate we can continue having. But I would like Victor to quickly react to the issue I raised about.
I want to make some additions, sir.
Okay, yes, you will do that. We are still having the panel. But please let Victor and Salahu make some quick reactions. Victor, we are listening to you. Unmute yourself, Victor.
Okay.
All right. Hello, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're clear.
Okay, so it's quite interesting that you're able to pick that out. While I was writing, I anticipated that was the possibility of a village to government arrangement. How do we organize? How do we arrange our framework? And how does that really reflect the kind of democracy we want in Africa? You know, it's clumsy, but then I just want to make something clear that the entire idea of eclecticism which is constitutional in the argument made in this paper, is to just bring out the fact that, you know, a feasible philosophy of democracy for Africa. And now in this regard, since it encourages intersecting cleavages, you know, interlocking memberships, and a cooperative political culture. So not necessarily a framework or a design where it's going to be from the village to the government. So in context, it is rather looking at providing or creating a foundation that emphasizes the primacy of the people as well as the value of democratic institutions, you know, and how this will be able to place a strong focus on the necessity of power distribution, you know, across various societal groups. So in context, village to government, what is conceptualized in this paper is to see how, you know, constitutional democracy, which is from bottom up, you'll be able to, you know, lay more emphasis on the fact that, you know, development cannot be development until it is people-centered. And once it is people-centered, it is also reflecting a system where, like, decisions are coming from the village. Of course, in a typical African setting, you see where, you know, the hierarchy looks like it moves from the village, you know, from the family, the village council, the village heads, and then it moves to the local government, and then which later on, you know, influences the kind of federal structure that the Nigerian state operates. You know, so the whole central idea about it is to see how we can emphasize a system that is more people-oriented, you know, a bottom-up approach that really reflects, you know, the aspirations of development in Africa.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for that, Victor. In other words, it's ideal, not the actual practice. Salah, do you have any brief comments?
Which should be meant for both African and other rest of the continent. I will start by saying that the fact that the theory postulated by the Europeans, in what way or the other, fail to cater for Africa and that issue, is the genesis of raising another theory. That is homegrown theory. So in essence, I think what the scholar have to do is to look for a midway approach, whereby we are going to have, during the course of developing theory, we consider both races that are there in form, in which such theory is meant to cater for. So we should be doing it in such a way that any theory that is going to be postulated should cater for not only the programmator of those theory, rather looking inward into the socio-economic factor of other continents, so that such theory will be free and devoid of criticism, based on the fact that it's not all inclusive.
All right, thank you so much. Just to mention that I'm not against having particular theories, and in fact, I believe that there are indigenous knowledge systems that we cannot do away with. But as we mature as scholars, it is important we begin to think that our work should also be, you know, engaged elsewhere. So thank you all for wonderful presentations you've had so far. I congratulate you all. Please kindly update your papers and reshare with us. Like we said earlier, we are hoping I will be able to publish a special issue in a journal